Greetings, Wilkinson here. Today I'm excited to have Sean Ferri with me. Who's that, you ask? First of all, say hi, Sean.
Hello, everyone.
What do you do?
I'm a licensed clinical psychologist.
Ooh, scary stuff.
Or exciting, depending on how you look at it.
Where do you work?
Currently, I have a small private practice, but mainly I'm at the LGBTQ Center here in Palm Springs.
I bet that keeps you busy.
Very
we're
busy.
all a little bit off.
You know, thank goodness for it, or else I wouldn't have a job.
There you go. Where do you want to start? How about a little of your history?
Sure.
Where are you from? What's your family thing? You're gay.
Yeah.
How'd you come out? Blah, blah, blah.
Originally, I am from New Jersey, the Garden State, same town as Martha Stewart. Ironically, we went to the same high school, so that's our claim to fame. I came out around the age of 17. A very interesting story. I told my parents separately. I told my mother alongside my best friend at the time, Diana. I had brought her home. We were in college together, and I brought her home, and I said, Mom, I have something to tell you. And my mom got very serious, and she looked at me, and she said, yeah, you can tell me anything. And I said, Diana's pregnant. And she looked at me, and I said, no, I'm just kidding. I'm gay. And
That is a great line.
Yeah. Big sigh of relief on my mom's part.
Wow.
And then my immediate follow-up to that was, please don't tell my dad. And because my parents were separated at the time, and they eventually got back together after 12 years, but that's a different podcast. But my mom was like, I can't keep this from your father. He's your dad. He's going to find out. He needs to know. So I said, let me tell him on my own time. So maybe 2 weeks later, my first boyfriend at the time, his name was Luke. My dad called me on the phone and he said, where are you? And I was supposed to be in school. And I said, I just left my math class and I'm heading back to my dorm. And he said, you're lying. You're at Luke's house because I'm outside.
Oops.
You need to come home now.
Busted.
And I said, oh my God. So I started freaking out. I'm crying. I drive myself to my mother's house and my dad's there waiting. And I'm just crying and I'm crying. And my dad says, he's just acting so angry and saying, I can't believe this. And I said, this is why I didn't want to tell you, because I knew you would have this reaction. He goes, no, stupid. I'm not mad that you're gay. I'm mad that you didn't think you could tell me. I thought we were best friends and that you could tell me anything.
Wow.
Followed up with, we've known since you were little. This is not a surprise.
Really?
Yeah. My mom was like, yeah, we've known since you were like 2.
We're just waiting for you to get around to figuring it out.
Yeah, exactly. We were waiting for you to realize what we've known all along. So,
wow.
Yeah, it was actually a really positive experience. And after that point, brought boyfriends around to holidays and stuff. All the family was very accepting, very welcoming.
Do you have siblings?
I do. I have a brother who I later found out had actually seen me with my boyfriend when I didn't know. So he knew the whole time and also was like, yeah, I was just waiting for you to tell me. It's all good. And he was like...
So he kept that to himself?
He kept it to himself.
Wow,
and he was military. So I was concerned about how he would react. But he was like, whatever, dude. He's like, you do you. And then I have a sister and she has 2 kids. And they were all like, yeah, we've known. And moving on. It was no surprise to anybody.
Everybody knows but us. Isn't that weird?
Yeah. Everybody knows but us.
Why do you think that is? I'm curious.
I think that there are signs that we give. For some people, we give signs very early on, whether it's in our mannerisms, whether it's in our interests. I know for me, for example, I remember for years and years, from the ages of probably 4 to 7 or 8, I begged for a Barbie doll for Christmas. I wanted one so badly. I remember walking around in my mother's heels and putting on her bras as a kid and just feeling so fabulous, taking a blanket and wrapping it around my waist like it was a skirt. So I think...
Those are minor clues.
Yeah, minor clues, but
right.
I think our family sees that. As a kid, we're just exploring. We don't have a concept of what sexual orientation is or even a concept of what, it means. We start developing a sense of gender around the age of 3, but what does that mean? Most of our concepts are socially constructed. So as kids, we get to play with that and we get to, just do whatever we want or feel however we want. And so I think our family sees that. And they see those signs way before we do.
Right. Okay, now the big question, because I know some of my gay listeners are wondering this. First one, did you get the Barbie doll? If you did, do you have the original box and did you save it?
My dad wouldn't get me a Barbie, but ironically, he bought me Baywatch Ken. He was like, I'll get you a doll, but it's going to be a man. But it was Baywatch Ken, who was in a Speedo and came with a dolphin.
Thanks, Dad.
Yeah. And so I remember like taking it out of the box and like immediately like being like, oh, it's Baywatch Ken. I have to take him into the bathtub with me. And so I would take him into the bathtub and swim along with Ken and his dolphin. And I was like, in hindsight, this was gayer than just getting me the Barbie.
Right. That's probably what made you gay.
Probably. It was the Ken. If you had got me the Barbie, it would have been a totally different story.
So did you take Ken's trunks off?
Yeah, well,
of course.
Yeah, of course.
Of course, they weren't anatomically correct anyway back then.
Some of the men I've been with, it quite accurate.
Well,
just kidding. All right.
So how was your experience at school and everything else? Were you out there or what happened there?
Yeah. At that point, my friends knew in college. I keep a very small kind of social circle. I always have since I was little. Like my best friend today is my best friend when I was 3. We are still best friends. So
was that a male or a female?
Female. Yeah.
And did you come out to her, obviously?
Yes. I came out to her probably around the same time. She had known because the guy that I was dating, Luke, who I had mentioned, we were all in the same circle and we were like enemies. And people were like, why do you guys hate each other so much? And it was because we liked each other. Yeah. Very like Helga and Arnold, if you watched the Nickelodeon Hey Arnold show.
Oh, so she took it okay.
Yeah. She was fine. She was like, and there was really nobody in my life that rejected me for it or made me feel less than for it. I think because same with my family, people knew. My best friend was, and I've known this.
When I came out to my younger sister, I said, did you know? And she said, no, I just thought you were in touch with your feminine side. Very in touch.
Yeah.
My brother, on the other hand, so in 25 years, he doesn't really speak to me anymore, but the only comment he made to me, so I came out to him and he goes, first there's a pause, and then he says, who leads when you dance? That was it.
That was the important question at the time.
That was it. Yeah. So
to make sure you're still the leader.
So you don't have any really juicy, hysterical, traumatic things to talk about?
There were I think the juiciest stuff was probably the girls because most of my social circle was girls, always, throughout my entire life. I resonated more with girls and as an adult with women. So I think the juiciest stuff was the girls that I was, really close with who I didn't know liked me or had crushes on me. And when I came out to them, it was devastating. So there was one friend that it took a while for her to adjust to the reality that we were never going to be together.
You dashed their hopes.
Apparently. But that's probably the juiciest. Yeah, nothing. My coming out was pretty boring. I think everybody knew.
Okay.
They were just waiting for me. They're like, all right, next page.
Okay. What made you get into the line of work that you do?
So I've always wanted to be a teacher. That was since I was 5 years old. I remember coming home from kindergarten, and every year I would have a different room in the house that was my classroom. And so I would play teacher and play school and invite my friends over to,
of course.
Oh, 100%. I would go to the stores where teachers shopped, and my mom would let me buy, and my aunt would let me buy, paraphernalia and decorations for my classroom. And I would have my friends come over and we'd play school. My best friend Jenna, who I mentioned earlier, she would be one of my star pupils. And I recognize now the kids that I didn't like in school would always do poorly in my class. They would not get great grades. But yeah, so I always knew I wanted to be a teacher, and I did that for a few years. I was a high school psychology teacher and a middle school history teacher. I taught in Beijing. I taught English and history for about 6 months. So that was really cool. But my last teaching gig, I was a high school psychology teacher, and I taught at a community college in Jersey. And students, especially my queer students, would line up at the end of the day outside my room and want to talk just about what they were going through.
Did they know you were gay at that point or no?
I didn't announce it, but when you're queer, you're brothers and sisters, right? They would never ask me directly, but I knew they knew, right? It was that wink, yeah, I'm not going to ask you, but I know you're gay. I know you're gay. Let's just move on and figure this out. Yeah. And so these students would come to me after class, after school, and they would just want to talk. They would just want to talk about whatever they were dealing with, whether it was queer related, their boyfriends or girlfriends or whatever, or their gender identity, or just what was going on at home. And at that moment, I realized I'm a safe place for people. And I think I've always had that. Growing up, I always had my friends would always come to me for advice, or they'd want to bounce ideas off of me. And so it was during my time as a teacher that I said, ooh, I really love listening. I really love being a sounding board for people. And I switched from the educational side of psych into the clinical side.
Did you have to go back to school for that?
I did, yeah. I got my doctorate, my PsyD, a clinical doctorate. And
where did you do that?
California Southern University. Okay. So it allowed me to continue teaching because it was a part-time program. So I was still teaching at the time. And then when it came time for internship, moved out here to California. And I actually did my internship at the LGBTQ Center where I currently work. And I stayed on as I was offered a position there as a senior manager of their clinic. So that's what I've been doing for about the last 4 years or so.
So we skipped a link, I just realized. So Jersey, California, how'd that happen?
Oh, so my husband at the time, we used to come out here on vacation all the time. And his dream was to move to Palm Springs. So that was what brought me here. I had no real desire on my own to come out here. But before we got married, he said, would you like to be interested? Would you like to move to Palm Springs? And I said, yeah, I'll go anywhere. And so we've been out here about 5 years now. We came right before the pandemic.
And you like it?
Yeah, I love it. I definitely miss Jersey. Yeah. Why? I like the laid back feel of it. Jersey's very like run, career.
I'm from New York. So.
Yeah. Yeah. You know how it is. Yeah. The East Coast mentality of like, keeping up with the Joneses, all of that. I feel
there is a certain energy of it though.
Oh, and I do miss that energy. I go back as often as I can. Yeah. All my family and friends are still back there. But yeah, I like the laid backness of California. It doesn't seem so rushed. It feels like time moves a little bit slower here.
So what kind of issues do we come up with working in your job here in Palm Springs?
Yeah.
Do you work primarily with gay men or with everyone?
Yeah, primarily it's all queer identifying folk for the most part, 99%. We get the occasional family member, ally, which everyone is welcome at the center. But in my private practice and there, I work with all different types of people. But I would say at the center, a majority of gay men, generally 50 plus in age. Yeah. And the biggest issues that I've seen probably in the past year, a lot of isolation and loneliness. A lot of people feeling very alone, feeling very to themselves, like they don't know how to make connections, or with that demographic in particular, a lot of loss, whether it's through retirement or through death of partners or family, loved ones. We see a lot of grief, and there's a component of loneliness to that as well.
Well, been there, done that.
I think it's a universal human experience, right? To feel lonely, to feel isolated at points in our life. Mm-hmm. And I think the pandemic only exacerbated that because we learned how to survive kind of on our own. And it's been hard for a lot of people to get back into the fold of society, or for even for society as a whole to get moving.
Yeah, looking back at the pandemic, to me, that's a two-edged sword, because what you just said, but the other side is we went inward and regrew, a lot of us.
Yeah, absolutely.
We didn't grow, a lot of us. A lot of us grew.
Yeah. Yeah, I think it was a time to practice some mindfulness and living in the moment. So, and figuring out what's going on internally.
So when somebody comes to you and they're very lonely, what do you say to them? What direction do you go with that?
Yeah, to me, it's my first question. How is it impacting you? How is your loneliness impacting you? And then how can we address that? So what are things that you want to do to feel more engaged? What did you do before? There was a time in your life where you felt engaged socially, or you felt not lonely. What's different now? And can we get back there? Or can we bring some of those elements in? So a lot of people, it's a fear of the unknown, of if I reach out to people, will they reciprocate? Will they be there for me? Will they see me for who I am? Will I have a sense of belonging? And we have to help people build confidence in taking those, leaps. And I think that's something that we set up, right? These kind of experiments of, okay, if you want to do X, Y, and Z, how can you go about doing it? If you're saying you're lonely, is there a club that you can join? One thing out here is pickleball. If people, I've seen in a lot of the people that I work with, that pickleball is the fastest growing sport in the country. And it's a great social, engaging, physical, and it captures the physical activity as well. And so I encourage people, if they're into that, to find a pickleball court to go meet people and play. There are also a lot of senior centers out here. There are a lot of social clubs. The center, for example, there's a lot of programming there. We teach Spanish classes and guitar classes and creative writing classes. And there's a men and women's chat that meets weekly. So just showing people that there are resources in the community for them. And once they realize that, and once they feel confident in engaging in them or seeking them out, that's the direction that I try to take people in.
What impact do you think social media has had on the loneliness issue?
Yeah, I think people have a false sense of connection through social media because they're engaging, right? But it's not meaningful. And people don't realize that you can be surrounded with 100 people and still feel really alone, right? Because it's about the quality of connections that you're having. So if you're on social media just mindlessly scrolling through, or if you're on social media and you're comparing yourself to the people that you're seeing there, it could actually feel even more isolating, more lonely, because people curate their social media, right? And they want to make it look like everything's great. So I know people who post their vacation photos that were taken 6-7 months ago, they're posting them now. And it looks like they're on vacation now, or they're always on vacation. And it's, oh, what a great life you have. But if you're somebody who's, stuck in your home or afraid to venture out and meet people, you're looking at that and you're like, that's not my life. That looks like more exciting than what I'm doing. So when it comes to that, I think social media can sometimes be detrimental. But if it's used in a meaningful, connected way where you're using social media to reach out to others and connect with others and have conversation, I know people who've met through social media. I've met some of my best friends through social apps and things like that. So I think if we're using it in a meaningful, mindful way, it can be helpful. But if we're using it as the barometer of where we should be in our life, then it can be detrimental.
Do you think that people really want intimate relationships? I'm questioning that nowadays. I have 5,000 close friends. I'm being sarcastic here on Facebook, for example, and I'm involved in tons of things, but it seems a lot of it is on superficial levels. It seems where you said you can be in a crowd. I feel that a lot, frankly. It's like I'm super involved in stuff. I've done all that stuff, but I don't, what I would call the inner circle. I've got a couple of guys I talk to and a couple ladies, but it just seems like back when, and I'm quite a bit older than you, but it seems like back when things were different than they are right now.
Yeah.
That's my read on it.
It's a basic human need to want connection, to feel belonging. And whether that's with one person or 50 people, we all have that innate human desire to want to connect, to feel seen, to feel like we belong. I always say there's a difference between fitting in and belonging, right? Fitting in, we have to change ourselves to fit the environment, to fit the clique, the social circle. Belonging is we're accepted. We show up as we are, who we are, and it just works, and people accept us for that. And so it is a basic human need, but I think that a lot of us are afraid to be vulnerable. We're afraid to show our authentic self out of fear of rejection, out of fear of abandonment. And I think that this is a theme that, especially in the queer community, we see, because we have such a history and such a legacy of being discriminated against, of being ostracized, of being left out. And so I think for queer folk in general, those feelings of rejection and abandonment, we're really sensitive to those. And so a lot of the relationships that we might see or experience are transactional or superficial.
Right.
And so it might be hard to remember what a really close, connected relationship feels like. But that doesn't mean that we don't want them, that we don't desire them.
It's like on the dating apps. It seems like a lot of the gay guys they say they want something, but they really don't.
Yeah. Oh,
they're talking the talk, but they're not walking the walk.
Exactly. I hear this all the time, right? The profile is like looking for a long-term relationship, monogamy, and just looking for my other half. And then you go out on a date and they're like on Grindr, like texting other guys while you're trying to get to know them.
Right.
Or they're telling you about 20 other guys they're hooking up with or dating or whatever.
Last week.
Yeah, exactly. So I think there can be that disconnect, but there are people who are searching. And I always tell, people that I work with, because they'll say that. They'll be like, oh, I met this guy and I thought it was going to be great. And then we hung out and it was terrible. And he wasn't looking for what I was looking for. And then I said, where'd you meet them? And they say, oh, Grindr or Scruff. And I'm like, okay, maybe that's not the place, right? So thinking about what medium you're using or what outlet you're using to find these people will change the caliber of people that you're going to meet, or change the caliber of people and what their expectations are.
Actually, I grabbed your name when we were at a play on Sunday.
Mm-hmm.
My friend Stan Zimmerman had written a play, and you were one of the talkback guests at the end. The reason I reached out to you is because I told you this when I contacted you, is I loved your gentle spirit that you had up there. It was really cool.
Thank you.
Yeah. And if anybody needs some help here, you can look up this guy. We'll put his info in the notes, the episode notes. But getting back to that. So how much of a problem do you think suicide is in Palm Springs in the gay community?
So I would say, as far as the suicide rates in Palm Springs and the suicide rates for the queer community as a whole, they are elevated compared to like our hetero cisgendered counterparts. And in my work, I do deal with suicidal ideation, but the way I view suicide is that it's the ultimate protector. It is the part of ourself that says, I can end your suffering for good. And most people don't want to suicide, right? There's a fabulous book about these people who had survived their suicide attempts. And in a majority of them, 99% said, as soon as I stepped off the bridge, or as soon as I took the pills, or as soon as I cut myself, I regretted it immediately. And so I think we're very afraid to talk about suicide. I think it's a very taboo subject because we don't know how to talk about it. But if we talk about it, if we open up the conversation, it becomes less scary, becomes less taboo, and people can start to relate with one another. Oh yeah, I've thought about that, right? I think most people at some point in their life have had the thought, what if my life ended? Or what if I didn't wake up tomorrow? I think that's part of the human experience. It's the shame and the guilt and the stigma associated with it that makes it feel really icky and dark and irredeemable.
When I was trapped in the religious stuff up in Seattle, married with 3 kids before I found out who I was, figured it out, I was probably about 3 hours from killing myself. But for me, I felt so trapped and I saw absolutely no way out. There was, of course, the pain, which you're talking about, but I just saw no way out and I just had to get out of it. I couldn't stand it.
And that part stepped forward and said, I can offer you a way out.
Yeah.
I can end this for you.
And then what you mentioned about the book. So it's, who would have thought that I would have the life I have today? And of course, if I had proceeded, I wouldn't have that. But I was really close. I had the plan and I was going to carry it out in a couple hours. So it was pretty wild. For me, with my religious background, I came to the moment where I said, if there is a God, he doesn't want me to do this. And that's what turned the corner. Now, my ideas on God have changed, of course, over the years, but that's where I was at that point.
I think for people who believe in a higher power, whether it's God or agnostic, atheist, whatever it may be, the higher power is within you. If you look at self, that is the higher power, and self doesn't want to die, right? You have this instinctual desire to live, right? And that's just a part of you, that suicidal part that just offers a solution, a permanent solution to a temporary issue most of the time, but it does offer a solution and it can be very attractive and it could sound good. But in my experience, most people who have either attempted or even people who have left notes, in that play, we read a lot of notes that there was regret in the notes for what they were going to do.
Right.
So I don't think for the most part, people actually want to take their own life, or that the part of themselves that has this kind of suicidal ideation actually wants to die either, because then that kills the part too. And I think it's a conversation that needs to be had.
Which is one reason why we're having it.
Yeah.
And what month is this?
This is Suicide Prevention Month.
Yeah.
No more apt time than now.
And I did repost, as you're listening to this one, go back one and listen to the one before. Or by the time this publishes, it'll be probably 2 back. But about 2 brothers, and one took one path and one took another. Very interesting story. But the subject comes up every once in a while for the guys and women that I interview here. So you're not alone, you're not unique, but...
Yeah. And I think that's part of it, right? People think they're alone in it. They think I'm the only one having these thoughts, or they think I'm the only one who feels this way. Right. And you're not. There are many people out there who can share your experience, who can offer you support, who can offer a hand. But it is a very isolating thought, because it's the thought that we don't like to talk about, right? It's the thought that we feel trapped having, because we can't express it. Because if we do, some people reject us for it. They get angry with us, or they start freaking out. This is something that I mentioned in the talk, right? That a lot of people are afraid to reach out for help because they don't want to elicit certain responses from other people, because then they turn into managing those people's responses rather than dealing with the hurt or sadness that they're feeling.
And it's come up, I can't remember if it came up on the talk back, but one of the problems is somebody may want to talk to somebody, but then they're afraid, if I tell you really what I'm thinking, and I'm processing out loud here, but if I do it, then you're going to call the cops or somebody, and I'm going to get locked up, and then I'm in trouble. How do you get over that?
Yeah. And I've worked with people like that, where I've had clients who, they don't want to say it because they're like, you're going to 5150 me and I'm going to be locked up in the hospital for the next 2 weeks. And that's not my approach ever. Obviously, if you're in imminent danger, that's one thing. And, if, you're standing on the ledge, but most people, there's a point before that, right? There's several points before you get to the final stage of it. And it's really helping not only people feel comfortable talking about it and sharing what they're thinking and what their thoughts are, but also the people who are hearing, giving them some guidance on, it's okay. Just, remain calm as you can. And it might trigger some people, right? Especially people who may have had their own suicidal ideation or their own attempts.
Right.
But, in those moments, to remain calm can be life-saving, because this person is trusting you with probably one of the darkest or most difficult thoughts that kind of resonates in their brain. And so to me, when somebody shares that with me, it's a real sign of trust for me. And that's what I focus on. This person chose me. They trust me. They know I care about them, or they believe I care about them enough to share this with me. And so that's the angle that I take. It's in a weird way, it's like an honor that you're sharing this with me.
Definitely. Right. Before, when we were talking, I showed you my first book, which was called Naked Truth, which is basically I painted people's secrets on their bodies, but that's exactly what I felt with that book, because it was like I was holding them gently in my hands, is the way I felt about it. And that's what same thing you're saying. Yeah.
People want to be seen. They want to be heard. They want to feel validated. They want to feel recognized. And in that moment, we are most vulnerable, right? If somebody's sharing that with you, and vulnerability is beautiful, but often vulnerability in our society is shamed. It's seen as weakness. And so people are afraid to share their vulnerabilities. And I think that kind of connects back to maybe why people have a hard time finding meaningful connections, right? Because they're afraid to be that vulnerable, or they're afraid to show them true selves.
Lots to think about.
Yeah.
Where does Sean go from here? And I don't mean after this appointment. Or you got any dreams, goals for yourself?
Yeah.
Going to write books? Or have you, or what?
I have not written a book yet. There are several kind of templates and outlines of books on my computer at home. I'm just trying to find what really speaks to me and what hasn't maybe been talked about yet, or talked about in a very meaningful way. So definitely books are on the horizon. I want to spread awareness and interventions for teens. My doctoral dissertation was on LGBTQ competent mental health care in schools. So I would love to work on that front as well, to expand access in schools and create safe places and safe spaces for our queer students and queer youth, because they are disproportionately affected and impacted by things like suicide and mental health issues. And that's the plan. Yeah, towards the end.
When you write that first book, I want a free copy, signed.
No problem.
And then I want you back on here to talk.
Okay.
All right.
That's the deal.
What's guided you in your life? Talk about that.
Yeah.
What are some things that you personally live by?
Relationships are something that I really value. I mentioned earlier, like I have a really close circle of friends. My best friend I met in preschool. I was 2.5, she was 3, and we are still best friends 30 years later.
That's right.
Yeah. So to me, people and my friendships and my relationships really guide me. They're the voice in the back of my head, pushing me forward and driving me to do what I do. Additionally, just the legacy of the queer community in my own personal life and in my professional life, what our community has gone through, what we continue to go through, and what we will go through, just helping the current generations to understand the past generations, help them feel connected, because I think sometimes there's a disconnect.
Right.
I think that in some ways the current generation or more recent generations, they might be a bit unaware of all the struggles that have happened and the people who have paved the way before them. So just making those connections and helping them find a sense of pride in our community, knowing that this didn't come from nothing. Our annual Pride events, the different things that happen around the country and around the world every year and every day, didn't come from nothing.
One of the things I like to do on my podcast, and what triggered this thought is, I don't know, it was during COVID sometime, probably early. So I had 4 of us were having dinner here. I do have Airbnb male guests in my house here. I've done that for a couple of years. So I had the guy was, I think, maybe 26, 27, or maybe even a little younger. Then I had my friend from New York City who had been there in New York for 30 years and went to Studio 54 and did all that stuff. Yeah. And then I had my other friend who is a priest in Salt Lake City for 30 years, a Catholic priest. So we had dinner. We're outside. We're sitting around. I cleared off the dishes and we're just chatting. And as I sat there listening to this guy ask the 2 older guys questions, I thought, oh man, this would make a great podcast, because it was amazing. Yeah, just the interaction there.
Ask people their stories. Ask people, what drives them. I think one thing that stood out to me about you in particular in this podcast is you want to hear the authenticity in people, because when you hear their authentic, vulnerable self, you connect, you make that connection. And so that's what I love, the people that you've had on, even in this conversation, just being able to freely talk about our own experiences and how we see the world. It's so important. And I think some of that's been lost. And how can we get it back? How can we get people talking again? How can we get people caring about one another again?
How can we move forward with the political climate? Yeah. That was another question I was going to ask you. What do you think of all this bullshit that's going on? Yes. With the trans, they're trying to turn everything back 50 years. Whoa.
And that's all fear-based, right? Yeah, it's all based in ignorance. And it's unfortunately a ploy that's been used for centuries, in different societies, not just in ours, but certain political parties have made their bread and butter off of scaring people and fear-mongering. And you could trace it back to the war on drugs, right? That there's this kind of boogeyman under the bed, and if you don't oust it, you're next, or your family's next.
It's even the word war where they're using that.
Yeah, absolutely. And so I think especially now, we're seeing so much anxiety within our community and so much fear in our community about, are my rights going to be taken away? Is my marriage going to be recognized? Is this going to go back? I think with Roe v. Wade, the second question was like, okay, what about Observeld versus Hodges? Are they going to reverse gay marriage? When Roe v. Wade was overturned, I think the next question was, what's next? Is it Observeld versus Hodges? Are they going to go back and undo our protections and our rights as gay men and gay women and trans folks and Title IX and all those kinds of things? It's a real fear in our community. We actually last month started an election anxiety support group at the center. It is just a space for people to talk about their fears and talk about their anxieties and how they're coping and how they're dealing and how they can get more involved and more active.
Is that ongoing now?
Yeah, it's going on. It's election anxiety.
By the time this is published, it'll still be going on, and we won't be at the election yet.
Yeah, absolutely. So check it out. In the footnotes here, we'll put the website to the center and stuff. But yeah, and I think one of the biggest things is that people feel a loss of agency. They feel a loss of ability to affect change because they feel big brother, big government. What can I do? But we want to instill in people, like, get active locally, right? You don't have to, start at the federal level, or you don't have to start, marching on Washington, but maybe in your local elections, becoming aware of who's running, what their policies are, because that's how people are most effective in their local communities. And that's how they're most impacted by decisions made in their local communities. So giving people back their sense of agency, back a sense of control in their lives, I think is really important when it comes to dealing with the political climate of today.
Are you fearful or hopeful with the November coming up?
I am hopeful.
I'm going to put you on the spot here.
Yeah, no, I'm actually really hopeful. I think there was a huge shift in me when the current president decided to step down. And speaking with other members of the community and my friends, it ignited a bit of a fire of hope in all of us. And people were like, what is this weird feeling? I'm like, that's hope. You haven't felt it in a long time, but that's what you're feeling. You're feeling hopeful. You're feeling a sense of joy in the possibility of a brighter future. And so I'm feeling really hopeful.
I can't close without What do you think about almost half the population choosing hate and fear and all that? Why are they doing that? And from my ex-Christian background, it's like, how is this possible?
Yeah.
I just don't get it. What do you think?
I think it taps into the basic human response, fight or flight response. When we are afraid, when we are fearful, when we don't know, right? We get the fight or flight response, right? I either got to get out of here, I got to get away from this, or I need to fight it. I need to get angry, I need to get aggressive, or I freeze, which I think a lot of people are stuck in that freeze, like, I don't know what to do. But I think people aren't so much choosing hate as they are choosing the path they think will lead to security, right? So they think that by following certain people or following certain rhetoric or advocating for certain laws, that they will be safer for it. And so I don't think inherently it's people hating others, it's people acting fearfully. And there's a part of them that says, this is really scary. There's a lot of question marks here. There's a lot of variables. So, you need to try to keep the status quo, what you know. Stay safe in your kind of bubble, if you will. And so our community, other minority communities, the Black community, during the pandemic, we saw, a rise in Asian discrimination and Asian hate. There's always going to be that target. And so who can we fear the most? It's the people we don't understand. It's the people we don't know. It's the people that we necessarily don't interact with every day. And so we become the scapegoat for a lot of people's fear in the world.
Why do some groups have to have another group to fear or hate?
Because I think for a lot of people, it gives them a sense of superiority. They feel like they're better than the other group. It gives them a sense of control. If I'm at the top, if I'm the cream of the crop, and everybody else is below me, then I'm always right. And it gives them a sense of power. And I think that certain groups can exploit that in people. Everybody wants a sense of autonomy. Everybody wants a sense of control. Everybody wants a sense of agency. And if we feel like we're not having it in our regular lives, we'll do whatever we have to have that feeling. And so sometimes it manifests in that way, in joining, hate groups or joining groups of people that fearmonger.
I love it when certain groups you're listening to, so they're saying, of course, they're all people of color, one way or the other, they're criminals and they're come and get you, and you're in your gated community. It's not going to happen, but it's just the fear.
It taps into that basic human, what if, right? Anxiety is a evolutionary byproduct. Our ancestors, before they had stable homes and jobs and stable food sources and all that, anxiety helped to motivate you, right? You had to worry, am I safe here? Is this a friend or a foe? Am I walking into potential danger, enemy territory? Can that spider kill me? And so...
Not a spider.
Yeah, that's why people have arachnophobia.
I do not like spiders or centipedes. Oh my God.
I was tapping in, right? To that, and that fear of, I don't know what that could do to me. And so today, we have much more stable lives. We have, more stable homes. Our food sources are more readily available. But yet there's part of our brain, that older kind of reptilian part of our brain, that still worries about the unknown, that still worries about potential threats. There's a part of our brain that is constantly, vigilantly searching for any potential danger or potential threat. And for some people, that part of their brain is on overdrive. And they're always in this kind of fight or flight stress response. And so recognizing that and understanding some groups are tapping into that fear, right? Fear this group. They're going to hurt you. They're going to make your life different. And people, out of survival will believe it. And I also think there's that sense of belonging that we talked about earlier. If these people accept me, if we share in our hate, then I feel like I'm part of something bigger than myself.
We all have the hats. I don't. But the hats and the T-shirts, there you go. So funny, my youngest son they're in Seattle. Of course, they're football fans, but I'm not a football fan, but I'd go just to be with them and watch the games and stuff. But I'd go in and it would be so funny to be, oh, I see you wearing your tribal outfits today. They literally were all dressed. There was posters, flags on the ceiling of the living room. I'm not kidding you.
And that,
It's
like,
the same, but
when you
same
say
idea.
tribal, like,
Yeah.
it's very much that, right? It's going back to a time where we had to express and identify outwardly who we belong to, right? What clan or what group we belong to. And so it was a safety, right?
Right.
A safety thing. Is this a friend or is this a foe? And so things like sports, right? Things like political parties, those all kind of echo the same thing. Like, I know I'm safe with you because you look like me. And when we meet somebody new for the first time, within the first couple seconds of meeting them, we've made a judgment call, right? And
All right, what'd you think?
of you?
When you walked in,
I was afraid. No,
I can see that.
No, within the first, you were so welcoming. You opened the door. Please come in. Can I get you water? Like, those are meaningful things that make people feel safe, right? And we judge people whether we like it or not. We judge people because our brain is wired to do so. We have to, because we have to know if we're safe in the company of people. A handshake. The history of a handshake was to show I don't have a weapon, right? It's like, I don't have
really?
any. Yeah. Huh. So you would extend your hand so that you showed, hey, I'm good. We're good. And so I think that a lot of today, we don't realize how much of our past, how much of our ancestry that we carry, right? We carry all of those things in us. There's a theory known as epigenetics, how things of our past, of our past ancestors, of past generations, how we carry them in our DNA, and then how today those things DNA comes alive, if you will, based on environmental factors and things like that. And it's in us. It's in us. We're wired certain ways. But when we're aware of that, and we're aware of our own biases, of our own prejudices, because we all have them, right? Then we can start to work on them. We can start to reshape them, reframe them, so that we don't continue to pass those on.
Tell me what makes you hopeful, or what you like about being a gay man today in 2024.
Yeah. Oh, that's a great question. I've never been asked that. What do I like about being a gay man in 2024? It took a long time for me to accept myself. There was a long time of me kind of bargaining. Oh, I'm not really gay. I remember my first hookup with a guy. I was like 16 or 17. And afterwards I was like, oh, I hated that. Yay, I'm not gay. And then the next week he hit me up. He's, hey, you want to do that again? I was like, okay. So I think I'm just proud of where I've come from. And for all of you out there that are struggling or might not feel that you're alone in this, or might not feel like you'll be accepted, there is a community for you. And I found it. I know so many people have found it. And I'm just proud of how far I've come, and that I can look in the mirror and, be happy with what I see reflected back, because there was a long time of my life where that wasn't true.
You're a good guy. It's been fun.
Yes, a pleasure. Thank you so much for having me.
Thanks for
such an
in.
honor.
We'll put the notes so they can find you. I'm sure someone will look for you.
Thank you, everyone.
Thanks again.